Hey everybody, Joe Casabona here. Thanks so much for joining me. I am excited because today I am doing a podcast mic shootout. So you can see I'm on my Shure SM7B here. This is my primary microphone, but I also recently just picked up the Rode Podmic. This has been a hard one to get a hold of. It's not on Amazon. B&H seems to have it the most often, so I'll link to that in the show notes or the description down below. But I'm also giving this mic away over at my podcast website. So if you go to howibuilt.it/giveaway, you have until December 5th to win this microphone and a few other things. So I decided I would give it a test. So I've got the Shure SM7B, I've got the Rode Podmic, and then I also have the ATR2100. That is the microphone that I most often recommend to people who are just starting with podcasting. So we're going to see how each of these sound. I'm really excited. You can hear the ATR2100 in action over on my podcast at episode 147. My wife is using that to do some voiceover work. But we're going to see how all of these sound. So starting first, we're going to do the Shure SM7B. Now, I should say this isn't the cleanest test. There is the equipment that I'm using is the Universal Audio Aero. I have a interface or preamp set up on it with some settings for a noise gate and things like that. But both or all three microphones will have the same exact settings, so you can kind of hear how it's going to sound on my voice. So I'll just do the intro to my podcast. I always use Bill Gates as a guest when I'm like doing a fake intro, so that's what we'll do here. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of How I Built It, the podcast that asks, how did you build that? Today, my guest is Bill Gates, the founder of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He also has a new series, special documentary on Netflix called Decoding Bill's Brain. Bill, how are you today? All right, so that was the Shure SM7B. Let's turn it over to the Rode Podmic. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of How I Built It, the podcast that asks, how did you build that? Today, my guest is Bill Gates, the founder of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He also has a new special or documentary on Netflix called Decoding Bill's Brain. Bill, how are you today? All right, so that was the Podmic. So now let me just do a quick switch here. And now we have the ATR2100. So let's run it with this. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of How I Built It, the podcast that asks, how did you build that? Today, my guest is Bill Gates, the founder of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and he has a new special or series, a documentary on Netflix right now called Decoding Bill's Brain. Bill, how are you today? All right, so that was all three microphones. So we're going to give it a listen and then come back. All right, so after giving everything a little bit of a listen, I think the gain is probably up a little higher than I'd like it to be on the Shure SM7B, but you're absolutely getting the cleanest sound out of that naturally. One thing to note about the Shure SM7B is that I am using a cloud lifter. This requires a ton of power to sound anywhere near audible as far as volume goes. So I'm using the cloud lifter to give it an extra 25 decibels of clean gain. Now, when we talk about the pod mic, this mic actually required a lot more power than I thought. The gain on my interface is up pretty high for it. It's the same gain for the Podmic and the ATR2100, so you can kind of hear the difference in how much more power the Podmic requires. That said, I felt like the Podmic has a little better pop filter. You're not hearing those plosives or the sibilants as much in the Podmic. But this is XLR only as well, so you would need to get an interface for it. Now, if we're talking about the ATR2100, I did use this on XLR. It is a USB microphone too. I didn't do the USB mic test. I don't know how much of a difference there would be there. But it was a little bit louder on the same gain, so it doesn't require much power. However, something that really bothers me with the ATR2100 compared to both of these microphones is it does tend to pick up a lot more, especially with hard B sounds or those plosives. And if you listen to 147, episode 147 of my podcast, especially, you'll hear a lot more sibilance in my wife's voice. So those hard S's, which can be a little bit grating after a while. I'm not saying my wife's voice is grating. If you had the sibilance hard on my voice too, it'd just be a little grating after a while. So, comparing, I mean, let's take the Shure SM7B out of it. That's like a professional grade microphone that I have because I do a lot of recording stuff. But comparing the Rode Podmic and the ATR2100, I would say that the Podmic is better, but I don't know that it's the best beginner mic still, if that makes sense. The ATR2100 is still a USB microphone that you can plug directly into your computer. It's about $30 or $35 cheaper than the Rode Podmic. But if you want a super clean professional sound for $100 plus the price of an interface, I generally recommend the Focusrite Scarlett Solo. That's probably another $100. So for $200, you could get a super clean sounding, nice podcast microphone with the Podmic. And then with the Focusrite, that has some phantom power on it too, so you can turn up the gain a little bit and process it the way you want. But that's it for this video. In conclusion, I'm going to stick with my Shure SM7B, but I think both of these podcast mics or both of these microphones have a place in podcasting. If you're looking for the lowest quality or the lowest price you can go. If you're trying to do things on the cheap, you're just getting started, you don't want to put a ton of effort into all of the right equipment right now, the ATR2100 is still your best bet. It is a really simple microphone that is in the $60 to $70 range. It's USB and it has an XLR output. If you want a slightly upgraded setup, the Rode Podmic is a great option, I think. It's $99 if you can find it, usually on B&H. And then you get something like the Focusrite Scarlett Solo. That's another $100. Now, this doesn't come with a stand or anything. I had this extra boom arm. This was $13 on Amazon. It's the newer one. So I will link that in the description below as well. But if you're looking for like that upgraded setup, it sounds really good, but you're not like shelling out a ton of money for it. I think the Podmic is really, really great for that. And like I said, you can up until December 5th enter to win a Rode Podmic and a Focusrite Scarlett Solo. So if you head over to howibuilt.it/giveaway, enter that giveaway to try to win those two things or a bunch of other cool stuff. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up down below and subscribe to this channel for more great content.